It's kind of like you hear about these true crime cases and you think, how could someone do that?
Right.
Like, what could push somebody over the edge?
Yeah.
So today we're going deep on Cary Stayner, the Yosemite Park Killer.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the murders themselves.
Right.
It's more like trying to understand
Absolutely.
all these different things that come together and maybe could lead somebody down this
Right.
dark path.
Yeah. And in this case, it gets really complicated because you've got this this whole other layer of trauma
Exactly.
that affects the whole family dynamic.
So we're going to look at court documents. We've got biographical info,
Okay.
articles about the psychology of serial killers. But the most interesting part is
Yeah.
Cary Stayner was actually the brother of Stephen Stayner.
Oh, wow.
And Stephen Stayner
Okay.
was the child who was kidnapped.
Right.
And years later, made this incredible escape.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember that miniseries, I Know My First Name is Stephen?
Oh, yeah.
That was based on Stephen's experience.
That's right.
So that connection is really,
Heck yeah.
it's just, it's really crucial to understanding the whole picture.
Yeah, it's not about saying this caused that,
Right.
but like how can something like this
Yeah.
impact a family, especially siblings?
Right.
Yeah.
So before you even get into Cary's story, let's just set the stage.
Okay.
December 4th, 1972, Merced, California.
Mm-hmm.
7-year-old Stephen Stayner
Okay.
is walking home from school when he's approached by this guy named Kenneth Carnell,
Okay.
who offers him a ride.
Wow.
That ride turns into a 7-year nightmare.
7 years.
7 years. Can you even imagine?
Oh my gosh. The fear,
Yeah.
the isolation. And at that age, I mean, what does that do to a kid?
And think about Cary,
Right.
who is still a child himself at this point.
Yeah.
You know, what is it like growing up with that?
Right.
That absence, that worry.
The not knowing.
Yeah. And then the incredible happens. Stephen actually escapes with another victim, Timothy White.
Wow.
And he becomes this national hero.
Yeah.
And his story's everywhere. Every newspaper, TV screen.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
How do you think that impacts a sibling?
Uh,
Especially one who maybe felt overlooked
yeah.
during those years of searching for their brother.
That's got to be,
Yeah.
I mean, sibling relationships are so complicated anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, there's love and rivalry and this need to be seen
Right.
for yourself. So, I mean, to see your brother become this national hero,
Yeah.
it could go so many ways.
Right.
Pride, resentment, especially if you're already
Right.
kind of struggling with your own self-worth.
And Cary was struggling. Even before Stephen's kidnapping,
Oh, really?
there were signs that something wasn't quite right
Okay.
at age 3.
Wow, that young?
Yeah. He was diagnosed with trichotillomania.
Trichotillomania, that's the hair pulling, right?
That's it, yeah. That compulsive urge to pull your hair out.
Yep.
And it's often linked to anxiety
Right.
and just having trouble regulating emotions.
So for a kid that young,
Yeah.
it's like, that's a sign. Like, something's not right. Something's going on.
There's something deeper going on, yeah.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, he was bullied relentlessly for it.
Oh, of course.
So he always felt like an outsider.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. A little kid
Yeah.
struggling with something he can't control.
Right.
And then you add on top of that this trauma of his
Yeah.
brother being kidnapped.
Right.
Oh, man. Talk about, like...
It's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, tragically, those warning signs,
Yeah.
they just kept getting worse as Cary got older.
Worse how?
There were incidents of, like, exposing himself.
Okay.
And then disturbing fantasies about violence.
Mm-hmm.
Even suicide attempts.
That's not... I mean, those are just, like, typical kid behaviors.
Right.
Those are cries for help.
Right.
Like, something is really wrong.
Like red flags, big red flags.
Yeah.
And it seems like those cries for help went unanswered.
It makes you wonder, like, what if somebody had intervened?
Yeah.
You know? Recognized how serious it was. Could things have been different?
It's the question that haunts these cases.
It really does. Especially when you're talking about trauma
Yeah.
and mental health.
Yeah.
Early intervention can be everything.
It can change the whole trajectory.
Right.
And it's just, you know, these missed opportunities are just, it's a recurring theme in these stories.
Yeah,
And it always leaves us wondering, what if?
absolutely.
So now you got Cary Stayner,
Mm-hmm.
troubled kid,
Right.
living in the shadow of his brother's very public trauma,
Mm-hmm.
struggling with his own demons.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to 1997.
Okay.
He's working as a handyman at the Cedar Lodge Motel
Mm-hmm.
near Yosemite National Park.
Okay.
Seems like a pretty average guy, right?
That's a thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
With serial killers, they blend in.
Right.
They seem totally normal.
Well,
and that's what makes them so hard to catch.
right. You would never suspect.
Right.
But underneath,
Yeah.
there's this storm brewing.
Right.
I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the details of it all.
Right.
But we can't forget about the victims.
No, absolutely not. We're talking about real people.
Real people with families, yeah.
Yeah. Kroll's son, her daughter, Julie, she was only 15.
15 years old, yeah.
And then their 16-year-old exchange student, Silvina Peloso.
Yeah, just starting their vacation.
Just starting their vacation, and then
they cross paths with Cary Stayner.
Yeah.
It's and then there's Jody Ruth Armstrong,
Right.
you know, this young naturalist working at the Yosemite Institute.
All these, these vibrant people
Yeah.
with their whole lives ahead of them.
With dreams and futures, and
Yeah.
it's so senseless.
And the way they were killed.
It was brutal.
It was
yeah.
brutal. Kroll's son was strangled. She was shot.
Yeah.
Julie's throat was cut. Silvina was,
Silvina was raped and shot.
Yeah.
And then Stayner even sent this note.
A note.
Yeah, this taunting note to the police.
What?
With a hand-drawn map
Oh, my God.
leading to Julie's body.
It's, it's that need to control
Right.
that we see sometimes with serial killers. Like, they want to manipulate,
Right.
insert themselves into this story.
Right.
It's like it's a game to them.
A sick, twisted game, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's even crazier
Yeah.
is that Stayner was actually interviewed by the police
No way.
during the investigation.
Oh, my God.
He was right there under their noses,
Like blending in.
acting like everything was normal.
That's what's so scary about these guys.
Yeah.
They can compartmentalize. They blend in.
They seemed so normal.
Like they could be anyone.
You'd never suspect.
Exactly.
And then a few months later,
Yeah.
Joey Armstrong is murdered.
Oh, gosh.
Equally gruesome.
Wow.
She was found decapitated.
Decapitated.
Yeah,
Oh, that's awful.
near her cabin.
So how did they catch him?
There were witnesses who had seen his car nearby.
His car.
Yeah, this blue International Scout.
So that's what tied him to it.
That was the link, yeah.
Wow. Makes you wonder, though, right?
What's that?
Like, were there other victims?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, he confessed to these 4 murders,
Right.
but there are a bunch of unsolved cases from the area
Really?
that have some really eerie similarities.
Like what?
Like Patricia Marie Hicks Dahlstrom. She disappeared in 1982.
82.
Yeah. On her way to Yosemite.
Wow.
And they just identified her remains recently,
Oh, wow.
but they still don't know who killed her.
I mean, it makes you wonder, right? Like,
Yeah.
if someone's capable of this kind of violence in their late 30s,
Right.
what about before that?
Could have been others, yeah.
I mean, it happens a lot with serial killers.
Right.
The crimes escalate.
Over time.
Yeah, and those earlier ones, they just go unnoticed for years.
It's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
And get this, Stayner's own uncle,
What?
Jesse Stayner, he was murdered in 1990.
Really?
That case is still unsolved.
Wow.
And then there's Charlene Mavon Murphy.
Okay.
Her body was found in 94,
Yeah.
headless and handless.
Oh, my God.
Really similar to Joy Armstrong's murder.
It's like staring into this dark abyss.
Yeah.
You know something's there, but you can't quite see it.
Yeah.
Like, how many more victims are out there?
And how many families
Yeah.
are still searching for answers?
It's just awful.
It's heartbreaking. So, I mean, what could drive someone to do this?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, was he born this way?
Right.
Or did something make him this way?
Is it nature or nurture?
I mean, we know genetics play a role, but environment and experience, they're huge too. Like,
Yeah.
Stayner claimed that he was molested
Molested by who?
by his uncle as a child.
Around the same time that Stephen was kidnapped.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you've got this double dose of trauma
Right.
at such a crucial developmental stage.
And, that kind of trauma,
Yeah.
especially sexual abuse, it can really mess you up.
In so many ways.
Your
Yeah.
sense of self, your relationships,
Right.
how you see the world. It can like warp your whole understanding of right and wrong,
Yeah.
empathy, compassion.
And then you add on top of that the whole Stephen situation.
Right.
Cary said he felt neglected.
The neglected.
Yeah, well, his parents were focused on finding Stephen.
Right.
And then when Stephen comes back,
Yeah.
he's this media sensation.
And Carrie's just like in the background.
Yeah. Imagine that, being overshadowed by your own brother's trauma.
Yeah. I mean, sibling rivalry is normal, but
Yeah.
this is like next level.
It's something else.
He probably felt this like huge sense of injustice, like he was
Yeah.
robbed of his own childhood.
And then It's interesting, right? Like, the timing of Cary's crimes.
Right.
They happened years after Stephen died.
Oh, that's right. He died in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah, in '89.
Yeah.
So could that be significant?
Well, I mean, grief can do a lot of things to a person.
Right.
Especially someone like Connor, who already had these underlying vulnerabilities.
These issues.
Yeah, so maybe losing his brother, even years later, could have been like a trigger.
Like the wound reopened.
Exactly, like a wound that never really healed.
So we've got like this whole cocktail of possible factors here.
Right.
You know, childhood trauma, family dysfunction.
The impact of Stephen's kidnapping, the media frenzy,
Right.
unresolved grief.
Maybe even genetic predisposition.
Yeah. It's a lot to unpack.
It's a lot to try and make sense of.
And it shows us that there's rarely just one reason for why someone becomes a serial killer.
Right.
It's usually this like perfect storm
Yeah.
of events and circumstances. To try and blame it on one thing
Right.
would be like a huge oversimplification.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle
Yeah.
with half the pieces missing.
Exactly. You can see the picture,
Kinda.
but you might never fully understand it.
Right. So we know he confessed.
Huh?
But what about justice for the victims?
Right. How'd that all play out?
How did the legal system handle this whole thing?
Well, that's where things get even more complicated.
More complicated.
Yeah. I mean, at the trial was just this whirlwind of emotions,
Yeah, I bet.
legal arguments, and it really shows you how hard it is
Yeah.
to get justice when you're dealing with mental illness.
And the death penalty.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into that then. Man, I can't imagine what that trial must have been like.
Oh, it was rough. You've got the families of the victims. They just want justice.
Right.
And then the lawyers are, trying to sort through this whole mess of arguments.
Yeah, it's a lot. So how did it all actually play out?
So it was a multi-layered process, right?
Well, you're
Because
right.
he was facing separate trials.
Separate trials.
So there was the federal one for Joy Armstrong's murder.
Okay, right, because that happened on federal land.
Exactly. And then a state trial for the other 3 murders.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's start with the federal trial.
Right.
What was Stayner's defense strategy?
Well, facing the death penalty,
Oh, yeah,
his lawyers decided to go for a plea bargain.
in a plea bargain. So he pled guilty.
Yeah. Pled guilty to first-degree murder, kidnapping resulting in death, and attempted aggravated sexual abuse resulting in death.
Wow. So that was it then. Case closed.
Not quite.
Oh.
So the guilty plea took the death penalty off the table,
Right.
but they still had to go through the sentencing phase.
Right. Of course.
And that's when things got interesting.
Oh, how so?
So Stayner, who had been pretty much emotionless this whole time,
Really?
yeah, he breaks down, starts crying, apologizes to the families,
Wow.
saying he wished he could take it all back.
Man, I bet that was powerful.
Oh, it was intense. I mean, some people thought it was genuine remorse.
Right.
Like he finally understood the weight of what he'd done.
Yeah.
Others saw it as, trying to manipulate the judge.
Get a lighter sentence.
Right. I mean, even his own mother, who was there supporting him,
Yeah.
she believed he was truly sorry.
Who knows what was really going on in his head, right?
You can never really know for sure.
It's tough. But in the end, what did the judge decide?
Life in prison, no parole.
For Joey Armstrong's murder.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that was the federal trial,
Mm-hmm.
but then there was still the state trial to deal with.
Right, for the other 3 murders.
So what happened there?
This one was a whole different ballgame.
Oh, how come?
So the defense lawyers, they wanted to avoid the death penalty again, obviously.
Okay, yeah.
But this time they went with a not guilty by reason of insanity plea.
Wow, that's a big swing.
Wow.
Why did they go that route?
They were saying that Stayner's actions were the result of all this mental illness in his family,
Oh, yeah.
combined with, his own personal struggles.
So like a predisposition and then the trauma on top of that.
Exactly. They brought in this psychiatrist, Dr. Jose Arturo Silva,
Okay.
and he testified that Stayner had obsessive-compulsive disorder, mild autism, and paraphilia.
Paraphilia, that's like sexual disorders, right?
Yeah, abnormal sexual desires.
Wow. So basically they're saying that he couldn't control himself.
Well, yeah, they're saying that all this stuff, it was like a perfect storm in his brain.
Right.
And he wasn't really capable of, premeditating or fully understanding what he was doing.
But I'm guessing the prosecution had something to say about that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They came back hard.
What did they argue?
They said Stayner knew exactly what he was doing,
Right.
that everything was planned.
So the jury was left with this big question.
Yeah.
When is someone actually responsible for their actions?
Right. Like, where's the line between mental illness and just being a criminal?
It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a question legal systems have been trying to answer forever.
And what did the jury ultimately decide?
They didn't buy the insanity plea.
So they found him guilty.
Guilty on all counts. 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of kidnapping. And he got the death penalty.
Wow. Death row.
Yeah. So he was sent to San Quentin.
That's where he is now.
That's right.
It's still there.
So it's over.
I mean, in a way, yeah.
But California hasn't executed anyone in years, right?
No, not since 2006.
No.
There's all these legal challenges to the death penalty.
So he's just waiting.
Yeah, stuck in limbo.
It's crazy to think about everything we've talked about today.
It's a lot to process.
All this trauma, mental illness, missed opportunities.
And it just shows you there's no easy answers.
No. I mean, it'd be easy to just call him a monster and move on.
Right.
But I think it's important to try and understand,
I agree. Understanding the complexities of human behavior, that's the whole point.
Exactly. We've got to recognize how trauma and mental illness play into all of this. An early intervention, man, it's so important.
You can't go back and change what happened.
No.
But maybe by learning about Cary Stayner's story,
Yeah.
we can prevent something like this from happening again.
I hope so. I really do. That we can all learn from this.
And maybe, just maybe, by talking about these tough issues,
yeah.
we can create a world where these kinds of tragedies are less likely to happen.
I like that.
It's a journey, right? Understanding how people work, how their minds work.
It really is.
But every step we take, it brings us closer to a better place.
That's a good way to put it.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been heavy,
Yeah, it has.
but I hope it's got people thinking, talking.
Me too.
And if you want to learn more, there's so much out there, books, documentaries.
There really is. Keep learning. Keep asking questions.
Yeah. And remember, the line between good and evil, it's not always so clear.
That's for sure.
But that's what makes it so important to keep trying to understand.
Absolutely. You never know what insights you might find.
Thanks for listening, everybody.